Hi everyone, my name is Noshin Zainab and I welcome you all to our today's mentor session, UI UX Design, the Game Changer in Your Products Journey by Amanpreet Singh Bhullar, Creative Director, KiwiTech. The founders that have joined now for the session, we would like to briefly introduce KiwiTech. And with that, I would like to invite Himanshu Nangia, Director Strategic Partnerships, to give a quick overview of the company. Over to you, Himanshu.
Sheen, thank you for that. Let me share my screen. Very excited about the topic. Before we could start with Amanpreet Singh's session, I would like to make an introduction about KiwiTech for those especially who are not very well aware of what KiwiTech is all about. So KiwiTech is a global community of innovators, investors, mentors, and enterprises. We are primarily focused around providing all the possible support to any entrepreneur, any startup founder coming our way, right? And since we have started this journey, we actually have added 500 plus portfolio companies in our ecosystem with over 3,000 plus investors, and through which we have helped them raise close to 100 million plus in terms of dollar values. We also have 300 plus mentors because we are very well aware of this thing that not every startup would be having someone who could guide them towards the best possible support, best possible move that would help them grow their business. We, as part of ecosystem, we also have an option to provide or share cost of development, tech development in the form of equity, which has helped us score, get close to $100+ million of equity in return of the tech services that we provided. We are now organizing more than 100+, events, networking events in a year. So how this whole journey started, this is basically the second venture of the founders of KiwiTech. The first venture was with the name of Aptara. They scaled that company from just few employees to 5,000 plus people and sold it for some $144 million in 2012. In 2013, they launched their first Kiwi startup program. The whole intent of this program was to help startups and entrepreneurs with all the possible support that they expect any ecosystem would be providing them to help them grow and nurture their business. In 2017, we launched our first demo days program the way we have in this session today. Similarly, we launched our demo days, which provided possible opportunities for startups to present their startups and ideas to the investors. In 2019, we launched our first 808 series program. So 808 is a combination of 404 plus 404, and 404 is an error. Usually we usually see 404 errors on web screens, and 808 is about correcting those errors and helping startups learn from the mistakes done by other founders and not to repeat those mistakes. We in 2020, 2021, as already presented on the previous slide, we have till now added 500 plus portfolio companies. We are organizing 100 plus events, and we have recently acquired, I think last year, a Griffith Financial corporate company, which is all about providing all the financial supports and services to any entrepreneur enterprises coming our way. And then we also have a few startups or few companies identified which we are going to acquire in coming months. The overall plan is to actually increase this 500 plus portfolio companies number to 1,000 plus portfolio companies by the end of 2024, and we definitely are on a track and very hopeful that even before the end of 2024 we will be able to get this number done. What makes us unique and what all components are we actually are, what exactly we provide as part of this ecosystem is, this whole ecosystem does actually include support for the technology services, wherein we are providing technology support with respect to development of web and mobile application. And especially now from past few years, our entire focus has moved into becoming a company which could actually entertain easily any emerging tech solution which is required. We are also doing technical due diligence, which supports an identification of financial numbers in terms of how a company should be moving forward and what all security procedures, infrastructure, and operation changes are required. We, through our sister concern Graphite Financial, we are also helping companies or startups, learn about financing and accounting best practices. We actually have developed through these events, which are organizing, in any year, which is, 100+ years, which has actually given us experience to become an event, as a service company as well, wherein we are helping startups, organize events for the products. If even, just like we are organizing this event, we are even open to organize such events for the companies coming our way. We have digital marketing arm, very well established digital marketing arm, and then we are also helping startups raise money through our crowdfunding program. So these are few events, recent event which happened in past. We have done our events in, Qatar, with the name of Qatar's first ever e-commerce hackathon. We actually have done family offices panels. We have done venture capital panels, angel investors, blockchain industry specific events, PEM demo days. So these are few flavors of events that we actually have done in past, and we are seeing, great results out of this. And startups participating in these events are getting benefits of, from the audiences, the investors, and the people, those who are participating in these events. So, and on today, we already had mentor sessions from Julie and John, and now the next session will be provided by Amanpreet Singh Bhullar, who is the creative director at KiwiTech, would be helping understand how UI UX could be a game changer of a product journey. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Nosheen.
Thank you, Himanshu, for the overview. I would now like to invite Amanpreet Singh Bhullar, Creative Director, KiwiTech. The screen is all yours, Amanpreet.
Thanks, Nosheen. Hello, everyone. Like introduced, my name is Amanpreet. I work at KiwiTech as Creative Director. It's been good 5-6 years now, almost, that I'm here with KiwiTech, and decided to do this workshop today for you guys. I guess I would just get started firstly by thanking you all for joining me for this session. At the end of the session, we would know why and what is UI UX design and why is it important to us, together with some fun facts and more insights about how you would be able to take better decisions post this workshop related to UI and UX. I'll start my screen share real quick, and just give me one more second. The game changer in your product journey and how UI UX design can be actually the game changer, and how it plays most crucial part in your product's journey, how it looks like, how it behaves, how it performs. Everything can actually be related to design, and we'll see how it all comes together. So UI and UX design. Now we'll start with what is UI and what is UX, and how it forms this discipline called UI design or UX design or UI UX design, how we know it. So in simple terms, what I see and interact with on the screen is the UI for that particular screen, or you may call it an app. A user interface, UI design, is the process that the designers use to build interfaces in software or computer devices for all screen resolutions, and focusing primarily on look or the style. Now, where I have things that I can interact with, the things that I see on the screen, that's the UI, the user interaction point. The things that I see, like the buttons or any of the action points where I can tap on or I can click on the web, all that we see, the design that we see, is user interface design. Now, if we talk about the UX design, the experience you get maybe while you interact with the UI or the design that you see on the screen, the emotion you develop when you're going through that design screen is the user's experience while they are working through your product. Now, user experience design could be understood as that it's a process that the design teams would use to create products that provide meaningful and relevant experience to users. UX design involves the design of the entire process of acquiring and integrating the product, including aspects of branding, design, usability, and function. Now, we're going to see some examples of UI design and how you see it every day if you don't know what UI design is until this workshop started. And you see it every day, and this is how you can recognize it, or now you would know. So What you see on the screen are examples of mobile's operating system UI. This is an iPhone on the screen where different screens on how things would appear. A designer has thought of it and they've placed it. They've created this layout. So if you interact with the phone, maybe if I want to increase or decrease the brightness, how from the top right corner, I'll do a diagonal swipe and how it works. So this is all thought of, designed by somebody, and then added as the UI design for this operating system. Another example is UI design for a mobile app. The screens that we see while we use our favorite app. Let's talk about Instagram. All the screens that we see on Instagram, like how I post a new image, how I make a new post, or how I add a new story, and what I see on the screens while I'm on the wall, everything is thought of and everything is pre-designed by somebody, and they've ensured that it fits into every phone size, every screen resolution, etc. Third example that we see on the screen is from television. So we all have smart TVs now, and the software that runs behind, that's designed, and that's the UI designed for television. The one that you see on the screen, like we can interact with it from the top, etc. We see that every day on our TVs, and that's also like designed by someone, pre-decided how it appears, how it will take shape. If I add more content, if I take some content off, like we all know Netflix, we all know Amazon Prime, we all use that. So all that we see on the screen is being designed, except for the video that actually plays. But rest of the keys, buttons, etc., that we can click on, get more information from, all those are very well thought of and are actually designed by someone already. Now, why is it important for your product is something that is also there to understand maybe. Now, since users can only interact with your app or website through the UI, its design will determine their main impressions actually. If you've tried any low effort app or let's say the website that we know exactly how frustrating it can get to deal with like a badly designed user interface. Apps are now competing for users' time, and you don't have a lot of time actually to impress a user. So if somebody installs an app, while I go through it, if I see a buggy app where buttons are all over, maybe or design is overlapping, or I can't read properly, or the colors are too jarring, etc., I would not be able to continue with the app. I may want to search for an alternative right there. And UI designers, I would say, bring a lot of creative edge to the project, making your app or a website stand out amongst the millions of other options that are out there. Even if you're following like a broader template or what a website should ideally look like, creative UI design is how actually one can stand out. Brand awareness, I guess, also plays a huge role in UI design by having all your designs follow the same guidelines. You can make sure that your product or service can become more recognizable. UI design just doesn't stop with the design of a specific asset actually. By having it as a strong focus of your project, designers are able to actually design for a bigger picture and how it will all look and work together in the finished output or the finished design or the finished results that you will see on your mobile apps eventually. I'll go to the next slide. Now, while we talk about UI and UX design, is there a design process? Like, is there a set of rules or some steps or some laid out guidelines or some specifications to follow? Is there anything like that or no? Or if there is, what could that be? Now, design, as we all know it, we all keep hearing this phrase called design is subjective. Somebody might like it, somebody might not like it. While the design stays a subjective medium to be contemplated on by everyone, I would also say that a lot of things can be really covered, which we'll call a right design, if we follow the design process, which will actually ensure that we're not missing on simple things or simple things that we don't miss out in our design. And that the process actually will tie us together and will ensure kind of that nothing is being missed out. Now, yes, all designers follow design process, but what is the design process? The diagram that you see, multicolored arrow symbol diagram, is actually the design process that all the UI UX designers follow. And it's a simple process, but ensures that we cover everything out and we don't forget something in the rush or in our own bias. It starts with discovering the product, then defining what all is there in the product, then finally getting to the design by research, and then creating a prototype of the design and validating it with our users. Now, this is like a high-level overview of, you may say, a bird's eye view to the design process. Now, let's just maybe get into the details on what all discover could entail, or what all define, design, and prototype could entail to understand that. Now, all the four top tabs that you see, discover, define, design, prototype, and validate, they have a lot of, you may call it, sub-tabs that have to be covered. When I call discover done, I would know that I've completed user research, stakeholders interview, competitive benchmarking, and heuristic review. Once I complete all these 4 steps, I'll be able to call discover as done, and I can move on to define. I'll start with discover and help understand what all discover entails, except for the fact what it's obviously written on the screen, but I'll just explain that to you real quick. So discover would also mean a discovery phase of a product's journey, where we're discovering the product out and finding out what all possible things or options that the user should get or should not get while they use the app. Now, how the research conducted during the discovery phase helps maps out actually the product's user journey and aids in design as we get to know the user better. The beginning the beginning stage of working on a product is, I would say, the most crucial one. This is the time when all of the big product requirements are agreed upon and a particular strategy is chosen for the product. This is also when an initial idea develops into a working prototype that you can actually interact with. The main goal is not just to make this prototype to satisfy the subjective feelings of the various stakeholders, I would say, but to make it work at the end of the day. A product's prototype should be created for the user, taking the particular industry's situation into account, carefully thinking over how the product fits into our situation, and creating it with an understanding of and responsibility to the product's users. Also, like in order to develop a really good concept, I feel that you shouldn't rush into creating a beautiful layout and discussing color palettes and fonts, because there's going to be ample time to discuss all of that. And good design is first and foremost. A focus on how the product should work is what would be needed in the discovery phase. We cannot jump into design right away. I understand the process that I'm explaining is design process, but in Discover tab, all of the line items that you see, none of them involve actually the design of the product. This is the stage maybe at which many questions will arise. This is where we're discovering everything. So I would obviously, all the designers or any other stakeholders will have a lot of questions, and doing proper design research will help answer these questions, and in turn creating a user flow or a user journey that'll be kind of foolproof, because we would have talked about or brainstormed about each possible scenario that could occur in a particular task that a user is up to do in your app. It also kind of would make sure that this is a design which is based on facts, and it is not just based on assumptions or preconceived notions. While designing a product, the focus should be on who is going to use that product. Users are, I would say, the main variable in every product design. Every designer has a certain amount of knowledge and experience when it comes to users based on designers' years of involvement and work within a particular development sphere. However, clients bring in their own knowledge. We all know that they've got ample ideas. So clients bring in their own knowledge, but based on their long-term experience in the industry that they've been working in, and interaction while they were working with other projects and different kind of activities that they were on. But how does this knowledge fit into designing a product? Typically, the previous experience causes designers and clients alike to kind of base their knowledge on a series of assumptions about what the users want or what they actually need when they come to your app or they come to your website. They're looking for a solution, obviously, but what is it? That's what kind of is perceived beforehand. Making these kind of assumptions is a good thing at this point, and doing so is a part of actually the working design process. But assumptions can also be problematic when we accept them as facts. So all these are open to discussion kind of items. Everything is like whosoever we show it to, any kind of stakeholder or anyone we're showcasing the design to or this process to, has full say. It's a very, very collaborative process. Only then I can understand the user more if I'm open to collaboration. Otherwise, it would like all be a fail kind of. Moving on here, stakeholder interview. I would just quickly explain what all this means. So I took a lot of time on user research actually. Stakeholder interview. Stakeholder is actually somebody who we perceive as the one who would be using the app. They're the stakeholders. So interviewing, I like people in the same genre, in the same age group, age brackets, demographics, etc. As narrow as we can get to that. But yeah, that'll be stakeholder interview. So it's interviewing people to get any kind of information that we would want on the app. Competitive benchmarking would be checking if the solution that you're trying to provide or through the app or the website that you're trying to make, are there any competitors in the market? And if they are, what are they trying to do to generate money through this business? Or if they're doing something different, or they're all doing the same thing, and if there's something different that you could do. So all this can be decided and brainstormed under competitive benchmarking. Heuristic review would be, again, checking everything to and fro, through and through, and making sure that, one, I have no questions left to ask anyone for that matter as a designer, and the product stays very, very, very clear in my head. And two, that the entire process has no fallbacks or no loopholes at this point when I'm closing the discover tab, or you may say the discovery phase. Once I ensure all that, I can jump to define phase where I will actually define my users' personas, user journeys, flows, wireframes, scenarios, and prototypes. So what is a user persona? It would be a document that I would create that would just have information about the target user who would be using this app or the website. Information like what age group do they fall in? What kind of behavior patterns do they have? Are they the ones who would be maybe primary decision makers when it comes to this particular app or idea that I'm trying to sail in, etc. So all those behavioral patterns and how they react to situations, etc., would come under user personas. User journeys would be, let's say I have 5 solutions that I'm trying to offer through my app on daily problems that we all have in that particular age segment or that age group. So the user journey would be, how do I start resolving one problem from step 1 until the step X or the step N, wherever I'm ending. So the entire user journey very well defined on if something happens, what are the fallbacks? If the fallback has something else happening, how many levels can it open up to, and everything defined, imagined, brainstormed, laid down on piece of papers, and then finalized all throughout the user flows when we're making that. A final user flow would look more like a flowchart diagram to you, which could also be understood as a bird's eye view to the entire app. And somebody can actually look at the user flow diagrams and can assess how many entry points to a particular task are there, and how many exit points, and if something is left incomplete or it doesn't make sense. So that would all be under user flow diagrams. Wireframes would be, I'm set with user flow diagrams, now I'm up to wireframes. Wireframes are, you may call, a low fidelity diagram or a low fidelity mock-up or a low fidelity imitation of the actual design that you would see on the app when you download it from the App Store or the Play Store. A wireframe would be black and white, kind of boxy things that would, if there's an image on a page, so it would just have a box and the box would say image appears here, as an example. So that'll be a wireframe, which is just boxy, black and white, just boxes everywhere, and just defines what sits where on a page, if viewed on a mobile screen or on a laptop or a desktop, if we talk about the web experiences. So that's wireframes. Scenarios would be the ones that we discussed. So let's say I am ought to do some task, and task entails 5 things to do. And upon point 3, I have multiple scenarios happen. For example, on point 3, I am making a payment for any service that, let's say, I'm trying to buy. Now, payment may entail a lot of scenarios. I want to make a payment through a credit card or a debit card, or using my bank account's net banking systems, or like a Google Pay, or some wallet kind of an app where I could just do seamless funds transfer between my bank account and to the actual business. So all those fall under scenarios, as many as we can think about and make sense of. This is done under define so that we don't fall out of a scenario where the user actually lands into and doesn't know what to do and they just exit out of the app. Prototyping would mean that the wireframes that I just created page by page, what appears after what, I just kind of connect them. There's no programming behind, there's no code behind. It's using the software, we're stitching the images together to emulate that kind of experience that you would get when the app is designed and is working fine, looks pretty, etc. At this point, these are just boxes behaving like the actual things, but won't look like that. So you can click around and you can see if it makes sense for you to complete a particular task on how you have envisioned it for your user. This is also the time where you put on the user's cap, or you act like a user, and you go through the prototype of the wireframes and you see if there are now any fallbacks that I need to work on. Once I ensure that everything is done, I can now jump to design. This is where actual design is starting. When I say design, it would mean that I'm using shapes, patterns, different colors, gradients, all sort of effects, lightings, imagery, everything, animations, transitions, everything is kind of falling under this third tab, which is design. It starts with visual brainstorming. Visual brainstorming essentially means that I go to websites or blogs or any of my favorite websites that I interact with pretty often, or things that I really like. I take screenshots, screen grabs, or create like a scrapbook out of it. Visual scrapbook. The scrapbook just screens what I want in terms of visual elements and in terms of how it would look eventually to the user. So that would all entail under brainstorming. What I'm doing is I'm just collating ideas, a lot of those which I just like, and I feel that these can be used while I design it. Design the actual app or website. That all falls into visual brainstorming. It's at the brainstorming stage. So all these are just imagery, maybe laid down on a PowerPoint slide or on an artboard, and just open for discussion and making sense out of actually. So once the visual brainstorming board is ready, I would then start making sense out of which colors work together, what typography works together, which appeals to the eye more than the other examples that I have on the board, etc. Jumping onto concept design, this would actually be creating a live concept of the actual page from the wireframes that we discussed. So picking any page from the wireframes and putting in actual design elements with full color, full branding of the brand that we're working on, with the brand values and the messaging, everything intact, that would be a concept design. So I'm creating this concept that I maybe would showcase to the actual product owner or the client, and they would maybe approve, reject, or suggest improvements on. So that's the concept of the actual design of any given page is what concept design would entail. In terms of design scenarios, the next point would be that, again, while I was doing the wireframes, which are just skeletal diagrams maybe of the actual design, I may have, again, missed out on something, which I will figure out now since I'm actually putting pictures, arrows, commas, lines, gradients, shadows, etc. So there would be maybe some adjustments now that I want to make because my design is designed so. Let's say I have some sort of space after every paragraph that ends, and wireframes didn't take care of that. Wireframes had very little space now, but the design is very airy, and to accommodate that, I might need to change the wireframes a little, or I might need to adjust these design scenarios that would come up once I actually get to designing the app. Design validation, the last point under design would be that I validate once everything is done. Validation would again mean going through it and checking if there are any obvious design patterns that my design now follows, which are bad, and if I want to remove them or I want to take care of them. Just a quick review of what's done, it would fall under the validation. The last, but not the least, and most important probably, would be prototyping the entire design and validating it. The first one that you see is Envision prototype. I wrote Envision here because that's actually a very popular tool that everyone has heard of if you are in the industry. Envision is a tool, it's a paid service where you can actually put your design screens and stitch them together like a prototype and show it to someone, and they can actually click around and it'll behave like an actual app or a website once it is coded. So there's no code behind, it's just images stitched together to create a prototype that emulates the actual experience. So that's done on Envision. So while we finish the design, we create a prototype in Envision so that all the screens are stitched together. If I hit on a button, it's supposed to go on screen 2. The screen 2 shows up with the relevant details. A design showcase would be once the Envision prototype is ready, I do a design showcase and I show it to the stakeholders on how actually these features are designed, how are they working, how different screens behave, what are the interactions needed by the user, how many clicks to do what, etc. Everything would be then judged and would be evaluated on. But the design showcase would mean actually showing off the entire set of the activities that you completed and you've actually reached this design that you've stitched together in Envision. It's a showcase of that. So all your hard work is now at display. Defining transitions and defining specs, I would take them together. Transitions would mean how one page changes to another. Does it just appears? The first page just disappears and the other one just pops up. If it pops up, how does it pop up? Is it zooming into your screen? Is it zooming out and then appearing? Or is it just shifting to left, shifting to right? Like popularly we do in PowerPoint presentations on how the slides would transition. There are various transitions. There could be animation support, etc. So all that is decided there while we showcase, and defining of all the specs on how these transitions would work, on how the interactivity would work, etc. That would come under defining the specs of the design that we're looking at in the showcase. Moving on, let's talk about how UI UX design is changing the game in the product's lifecycle. We'll see some examples first. On the example shows you, this is like a comparison between a research-guided user-centric design that I feel I've done because I followed all that we just talked about, like the entire design process, and versus a design that just looks good and just follows the trend. So if I go on Instagram, Pinterest, or any apps like those where design is being talked about, so what's relevant and what's within the times or what designers are currently experimenting with, that's more towards the right is what I'm trying to show. If we see from the first example, which is user-guided, user-centric design, the first image that you see, which says something like this, I'm trying to show here is that the screen, which is there in the center, which is on the mobile phone, could have these many fallout options. On the same screen, I have brainstormed or researched enough, and I found out that a simple one screen can have like 10 or 12 or 15 separate screens. There will be, which will be called, like, let's just call them supporting screens for this one. There would be interactivity on this, and I have researched enough that all this will entail this particular screen. So this one screen would actually entail designing for 30 screens, let's say, as an example. That's what I have brainstormed already on, I've researched on, and validated on. The example that you see just below the something like this diagram, the handwritten thing, is actually if I'm research guided, I would know how many buttons I would need, how many interactivity points I have, how many arrows, etc. All the elements in my design, what all is needed. And below that you see in green and some red highlights is kind of a snapshot of a design system that we've achieved or that the designer has come up with after they've brainstormed and the research on the design, how it should be for the user they are trying to target. Versus on the right side, I see very less kind of brainstorming happening in the first image, which has 3 buttons and these 2 mobile screens and a scroller on the right. I'm just assuming things that, oh yeah, I have this kind of activity to complete on a certain app, and I would just need all this. And I didn't think about, or I didn't care much about if a user needs to do something separately that what I am thinking of, then what? So I have not possibly thought of all the fallback options, etc. But I still feel that it's good to go because I'm going to, at the end of the day, follow the newest design trends, and everything would be on track if it looks good and if it resonates with the users that they see in today's times, it will just work. So second design is more like based on assumptions. And first one is research guided and has some study behind it, has some reasoning behind it, and some logic behind it, which is why it looks how it looks and it behaves how it does. While we talk about the example 2, which also says that I'm using the design trends and what is prevalent on the internet or is prevalent on all the popular apps which talk about design, etc. At the same point in time, I would also say that pursuing innovation is not always the best option. Now, what do I mean by that? I'll explain more on this, but just because something is being innovated on doesn't mean that I, as a product, should also follow that. Even if it makes sense for me or not, that has to be validated on. I would have to check if the particular innovation or the particular thing that is new in the market and everyone gets to see that in terms of design, visual design, is it worth carrying over to my product or no? That has to be well validated before you even check for the innovation that you're trying to copy or emulate on your product. There are far more cases that prove that it is often better actually to stick to the tried and true methods instead of trying to create something completely different or completely new or completely relevant with the times. Well-conducted design research, I would say, provides information on the current users and the competitors, which is very, very important to gauge, research, and study on before you actually jump onto the design. And it also kind of gives insight into the latest design trends. So the designer would be aware what's going on as the latest in the design industry, if we talk about these kind of apps that we're designing for. But as well as, I would say it not only gets you the latest design, insight into the latest design trends, it also gets you insight on steady and stable UX patterns, which should be adhered to. So in other words, I'm trying to say the UX pattern, which are tried and tested by other apps and improvised on, we could also emulate those and not trying to reinvent the whole wheel. For example, if the user is habitual of finding the settings icon at a certain part of the screen because all popular apps have that setting icon consistently sitting there at some place, let's say top right corner, and my app now suddenly starts to use it under the profile. So user has to go to profile and then settings. Then I'm trying to reinvent the wheel. User is already kind of habitual of finding the settings button at a certain place, courtesy of the popular apps they're using. So if we emulate the same experience, we get automatic buy-in. That you can also call it emotional buy-in from the user, since they're habitual of using the design in a certain way with all the popular apps. So yours could also be one of those and could do that. The results of research done for one or more design solutions will give your project actually the competitive edge and a far more developed understanding of long-term design strategy, and significantly, it would increase your chances to create a successful product that users would love to interact with. Moving on, how to decide on your design service partner. Now, if we talk about the design service partner, there could be broadly classified into two categories: onshore design business partner and an offshore design service partner and an offshore design service partner. Now, let's understand the difference between the two. If we don't know already, you could be laughing all this while, but yeah, let's quickly go through it. Offshore partner or an onshore partner. Onshore partner will bring in benefits like you could be doing face-to-face conversations and real-time actual collaboration would happen. Since they are in your city, in your area, etc., you could actually meet them, and face-to-face conversations makes a lot of difference, we all know. And so onshore partner brings in that benefit. Second benefit an onshore partner brings in is effective communication in the same language. I'm sitting in India at this point, and maybe my most preferred language to interact in could be Hindi, which is our national language as well in India. Now, if I get a Indian design partner, it'll be easier to communicate with them. The communication would be more effective, as I would be able to express myself better in the home language that I'm very used to talking in, compared to somebody else who doesn't understand my language, or maybe has acquired this language as a second, third, or fourth language that they're learning, and would not be able to understand the emotion I'm trying to convey with my mother tongue, maybe. Compared to offshore partners, the benefit an offshore partner can bring to you is lower rates. And this is something that we all stumble upon, and we would want to check and correct on, and keep a tab on as well, being a startup. So lower rates, one of the greatest benefits of an offshore partner, together with larger talent pool. They have their teams created already. They create the portfolios while they talk to you, so they can showcase their work to you. They also get you profiles of the actual service providers who would be working with you, like the actual resources who would be on board on your project. You can interview them, talk to them, etc. All the cost, responsibility, etc. stays with the offshore partner, and you don't have to carry a dime on that, together with lower rates. So the benefits are great, maybe if we talk about the offshore partner, but then we lose out on face-to-face and real-time collaborations, also talking in our native language. Moving on, I would just explain maybe a little more on how each of these, like an offshore and an onshore partner, has their disadvantages as well. If we talk about an onshore partner, let's say I am very convinced with the fact that face-to-face and real-time cooperation and effective communication in my own mother tongue language, or the same language that I speak and comfortable in while I'm in this country, I get such a partner. While I'm convinced with that and I hire somebody onshore, the disadvantages I need to be aware of are that the cost here onshore would be higher. The cost of doing business at home means that you'll be paying more out of your pocket. If we talk about America, let's say, the American standard demands that the high quality comfort zone of the continental states drives up prices. In terms of software development, you pay for what you get, and getting the higher quality product from the convenience of your home country would have its own price. Second would be, they would not have a huge talent pool. A higher price isn't the only problem possibly the onshore outsourcing would face. US has been, if like again talking about American market in particular, American market has been suffering from a shortage of software developers, let's say. The current pool of experienced engineers aren't supplemented by enough, let's say, skilled students or skilled individuals graduating from colleges to fill in that gap. And as the time passes, the number of free experienced agents looking for jobs decreases, while the chef of green engineers kind of rises to the top, which gets to that pricing pattern that we're talking about, or maybe complaining about, let's say. If we talk about the offshore partners, the only problem there that could pop up would be, again, the benefits that we see on the onshore partner tab, which is there is no face-to-face or real-time collaboration. They are in a different time zone than yours, most probably. And while you work in a different, so you'll be up and they'll be off their work and taking rest. While they work, you'll be taking rest and off work. But it can also be understood as one of the advantages. While you assign work and you go to bed, while you get up, you see all of that work done. So it could also be perceived as one of the advantages, while it stands out as a disadvantage as well. Now, moving on, at KiwiTech, I would say, like where I work again, so design is what we call as our differentiator. And I would also say that we are proud offshore partners for all our clients, because we're dealing in a lot of different continents, regions, countries, you may say. So while we work there, design is what differentiates us from our competition. And I, as creative director at KiwiTech, take great pride in the same and have crazy confidence in the teams that work with me. What you see on the screen now on the right are one of our key marquee clients that I, of course, boast about. They boast back about KiwiTech. But just talking more or taking a little more towards what happens at KiwiTech or what is the design team like. So it's a team of 40 UI and UX designers. It's a mix of both. Some very experienced and some not so very experienced UI and UX designers. A mix is very, very, very essential. Not so experienced one will bring that new creative energy back to the board that might be at risk with the ones who are growing old. So a good mix is always important. We've got experienced on-roll staff. So these are not hired just for the product that we're designing for. These are on-roll people working for KiwiTech on KiwiTech roles. KiwiTech as a company and design as a service offering brings in over 10 plus years of experience in serving offshore clients. We do not have any home country, any clients from our own home country. All these clients that we're servicing are spread across all over the world in different continents, and none of them are like our own or belong to our own country. So, and doing that from 10 plus years adds a lot of different kind of experience working with startups and managing those difficult situations that every startup has and it poses at one point or the other for a startup owner. We've got over 100 and let's just say 1,500, over 1,500 successful project deliveries until now. This is a good amalgamation, a good mix of all the industries that are out there. So we've got fintech, edutech, health tech, everything together. The logos that you see on the right, it's also a kind of a mix of everything that these industries have brought to us in terms of experience. While we talk about all that, the average customer satisfaction index, which is one of the ways that KiwiTech gauges its performance on, is sent across to all clients post-closure of any sprint release or any design release or any sort of release that we're trying to make in that particular sprint. A CSI form is sent out with various questions that help the client evaluate the service that they got from KiwiTech employees in terms of if they were getting to design or if they were getting into development. Whatever teams they were interacting with, they could leave direct feedback on the CSI, and the average CSI score for the design team has stood to 4.25 out of 5 during this entire tenure that I'm talking about, and that's something really, really big, and I really take and I'm really super proud of the thing. So moving on, that's all I have for you guys today in this workshop, and I hope we are now clear on what UI and UX design is. Why is it so important? Why is the research important while we're designing? And so the terms are very, very new to a lot of people. I'm sure if you're starting up fresh and you've got a lot of questions, so these have possibly added more to, of course, they helped you solve a lot of questions that you had, but that gives rise to more questions now since you're more aware. So, sorry, any questions that you guys have, possibly we'll take them now. Thanks, back to you, Nashin.
Thank you, Amanpreet, for the presentation. We do have some questions. How long does the full process take?
I'm assuming the fact that you're referring to the design process, and how long will the actual design process take if we talk about designing a product, right?
The question says how long does the process take? Also, the same question, there is another question from the same person that is asking, do you work testing in?
Do you work testing in? I'm assuming the fact that they're trying to ask, do you test your design, or do you test or validate your prototype before it actually hits development? So that's how I'm gonna maybe understand this and answer. So the design process can take actually, the entire design process would just go on while we're designing your product. And since you start starting from research to prototyping and then actually designing and then validating. So the design process spans across the entire lifespan of designing an app or a website. Typically, it could entail from the time would be like 4 to 6 weeks where everything could complete start to finish, where we're envisioning the product, brainstorming on it, starting the research, creating prototypes, wireframes, and then getting to design, and then finally designing all the screens that we've thought of during this phase. So I would say safely 4 to 6 weeks at the minimum is what a design process would entail for a typical website service, like a SaaS service or an app that we design for. Yes, we do validate the design. There are various ways to validate a design, starting from heat mapping your own design. There are several services available on the web which can help you do that. So they would evaluate your design and would tell you where the user's eye would eventually or would sit when viewed on the medium of choice. So if I'm designing for a mobile app, if I'm viewing the app on my mobile screen, where is my eye going to sit like? Because of the design that I've done, that's typically heat map. So where it's heated, that means where the eye sits on while somebody is viewing that design as a user. So testing using heat maps, testing using actual user base. I can also set up a small team of people who would fall under the same demographic and the same age. Same age bracket. I would actually get some users and get them to test the app, go through all the scenarios, and just make sure that they love it. And if they don't, I would be ready for changes. Next question, please.
All right. Which software should we be using to design?
There are various softwares actually available in the market to do that. Starting from there's Figma, there's Adobe XD, there's Sketch. There are whole lots actually. These are the most popular ones. It's actually dependent on the designer, which software they're most comfortable working with. Although I've seen Figma gaining a lot of popularity these days. So Figma, Sketch, or Adobe XD is your choice.
All right. What is a design prototype?
A design prototype would be in terms of, so it's an actual design. So design is the actual design, obviously. So the design that you see on the screen would interact now. It would not just be a static image. If you see a button on the screen, you would actually be able to tap on it or click on it. That's what a prototype does. So Envision, the service that we talked about, that helps us do that. Let's say there's a screen I'm looking at which has a submit button. While I upload it on Envision, I can actually mask that submit button and put a URL or a stitch to a fallback screen or whatever the action that is happening, and it's taking the user to the other screen. So I stitched that together with the software. So the end result would be if I hit on submit or that action or CTA button, whatever is supposed to happen on the next screen would actually be shown to you. It will be emulated like it actually would work in the app. But at this point, since it's a prototype, there's no code behind. These are just images stitched together to form an experience to tell you how the user would feel or interact with a certain feature.
Should I hire onshore or offshore partners when it comes to design?
We just had a look at what onshore partners bring in as the benefits or the disadvantages that are there. And we also looked at benefits and disadvantages of an offshore partner, cost being the major one. So if I think you're starting out as a startup, I would also have questions like, I understand the differences, the benefits, the disadvantages, but I would still maybe want to stay with an onshore partner only for the fact that I can see them, I can locate them, I can go there, I can visit that office, I can talk to them, I can phone them whenever needed. However, with COVID, I guess the distance of an offshore partner is also reduced. You can get hold of them over Skype or telephones, obviously, WhatsApp, etc., calls, Zoom calls, etc. So I would say if cost, if not if, but it's actually always one of the major driving factors for any startup. To keep the cost low, one can start with startups and see how the experience goes. If you like it, and I bet you would, offshore partners is the way to go.
Right. What is a design system? Should I be following one?
A design system is something that we also had a look at when we were talking about a design which is researched and a design which is not so researched but follows the current trends. The diagram that you saw beneath that, which had all those buttons that are defined, is the design system. What does a design system do? it just aids the designer to stay coherent, to stay, I would say, like the consistency in design is ensured using a design system. For example, I'm designing the very first page of my app or my website. I'm done designing. Now I know what my CTA button looks like. If it's a rectangle, if it's a round shape, if it's some different shape, like a custom shape or a rounded rectangle, etc. So I would know how my CTAs look and behave like. I would know what my headline font is and what is the font size that I want to keep while I've designed this one page, and this look really is what I want to go for. I would then start using those values and start putting them in a document that would eventually make up my design system. While as I go forward and design other pages, wherever I need a CTA, I can refer back to my design system and pick the CTA from there so that there is no variation while I redraw any of the elements and I'm going through the design. A design system would continue to grow, and it will act like a library for us, for the designers, to pick things from and use on the actual pages that you are now designing for, so that you stay consistent. The buttons, the behavior patterns, the actual UX patterns, etc., should look consistent, not only with the experience, but with the branding as well. That's what design system would ensure, that all buttons are of same shape everywhere. The font size, spacing, etc., appears the same, and there are no visual jumps in your design at any point.
There is another question. I have a unique, never seen, heard before product idea. How do I validate my design before development?
A unique, never before product or an idea, and you want to validate. If you like, we all feel that my idea is the idea, and it's going to be the next breakthrough in the service industry that I'm getting into, or the offering that I have is like so good to believe only. We all feel that while we start out with our products, but it's important that we test that out. Is it really sailing with my users? Is it really working for the target audience? Is it really meant for the target audience or no? And a whole lot of other questions get resolved or get answered if we test that out. So I'm sorry, I could you just repeat the question again? I just lost.
Sure. It says, I have a unique, never seen, heard before product idea.
So while I will be designing, I would also reach the phase where I would create my envision prototype. The same prototype can be used and can be sent to users. Like I said, it is tested. The design is tested with the same kind of users who fall in the same demographics and the age groups. So that envision prototype, let's say it is made for an app, an iOS app. So people with an iPhone would be able to see the same prototype on their phones like an app. So they would have an app icon they can tap on. They tap on it and it behaves and works actually like an app, but there's no code behind. So I'm not getting my money stuck into development before even evaluating if the design and the idea is really working for my target group. So I can create those prototypes first, float it across my target groups, friends, families, well-wishers, whosoever, and get as many ideas as I can, and ask people to complete these tasks that the app is meant to do. That will give me more insight on how it should work like.
All right. Thank you, Amanpreet, for the presentation and all the responses.
Thanks, Dr. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time today with me and putting your trust in the workshop. I'm sure a lot of questions are being answered, and there are whole lots now in your mind, maybe that'll pop later if you think more about it. Feel free to write back. You've got email addresses of all of us. We'll be happy to assist at any point. With that, thank you and take care.
And with that, I would like to thank our mentors and guests for joining us today, and we'll be back soon with more workshops. We have recently introduced a referral program at KiwiTech. This program rewards anyone who contributes to fruitful introductions to our company. Over the years, we have built this robust ecosystem of startups with the help of your trust and subsequent referrals. We realize it's time we give due credit to this trust through our referral program incentives. So if you know someone looking for tech development support to scale, join our referral program and follow the below mentioned steps shown on your screen or visit our website. Contribute to our growth journey and earn incentives for your trust in us. Also, apart from the workshop, we have more upcoming events. As you can see on your screen, you can check out our website for the same. Do join us, and we would love to host you on those events as well. Thank you and have a great day ahead.